even though this is our last Genesis class, this is not going to go away. So at 6:30, starting next week, we are going to have our summer series. We're going to have a parade of speakers coming in, and in this room at 6:30, I have given them the task of giving us their favorite sermon or Bible class, so they should be very, very good. So please, 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 if you have time or can keep that in mind, be here 6:30 all the way through the end of July. It's going to be a lot of fun. So. I know you've slept since then, but what Genesis chapter 44 ends with what?
Judah taking the place of, saying he would take the place of Benjamin.
Okay, so why is Benjamin in trouble? Okay, yes, yeah. Well, did he take the cup or what? Okay. Yeah, okay, he was framed. Yes. So Joseph puts his diviner's cup into Benjamin's sack. He accuses his brothers of stealing his cup, and so he sends some men to track him down. They come back, and each time they open up sack after sack after sack, there it is in Benjamin's cup. What is the reaction of the brothers whenever they find the silver cup in Benjamin's bag? What specifically, other than gasp? Yeah, okay, yes, yeah. What a great, we dominated charades. Yes, they tear their clothes. When's the last time they tore clothes in the story?
Joseph taking off the robe.
Yes, yeah, so last time they tore clothes to deceive. This time they tear clothes because they are being deceived. Last time they tore clothes to hide. This time they are tearing clothes because of something that has been being revealed. So there's these parallels of the last time they tore clothes. We kind of looked at last week why I paired those chapters together is because each one of those chapters is Joseph testing his brothers and trying to reveal if they are the same people that threw him in the pit. And so he continues to put them in situations that mirror what they did to him and see what their reaction is. And each time they pass the test. Who is the first brother that was in trouble? Besides Benjamin, who is the other brother that was in trouble? Simeon, that's right. Okay, so Simeon, he's kind of a problem brother. He kind of flies off the handle. He's very violent. He's the one, him and Levi were the ones that instigated the slaughter at Shechem. So that was kind of the first test. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? You've got a brother in trouble, and he's kind of a problem. Are you going to try and bail him out, or are you just going to leave him there as problem solved? Then he ups it a notch and does the same thing with Benjamin. Benjamin is an even more of a parallel test because Benjamin is what? The favorite. Yeah, so Benjamin is the favorite. So now it's like, okay, I was the favorite. You left me for dead and sold me into slavery. Now Benjamin is on the ropes. He is, I am offering to bring him back with me as a slave. What are you going to do? Judah steps up. We see this as Judah's big shining moment as a leader. He steps up and says, no, I will go in his place. What is the crux of his argument? Judah's big speech.
Worried about his dad.
Yeah, so Judah's whole big thing is that this will kill my father. All right, if we don't come back with his favorite son, this will kill my dad. And so we see this incredible turnaround in Judah's character from a guy who would sell his own brother to make a profit regardless of the hurt that he would cause his father, to this man who will not give up his brother to shield his father from emotional hurt. So Judah makes this absolutely crazy 180, and now we are in chapter 45, starting in verse 1. The big question we are left with is, what does Joseph do next? Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. What is weird about what Joseph asks?
So where he asks, "Is my father still alive?" When, I mean, you just said this will kill my dad.
Right, yeah, okay, so just literally a few seconds ago, it seems like Judah said, "This will kill my dad," and then Joseph's first question out of his mouth is my father still living? Any guesses?
I think it's probably because, he was expecting his dad to come save him, and when his dad didn't come, he justified and said he died.
Okay, yes, yeah, so there's this big question of where is dad? Why isn't Jacob coming? Okay, any other?
He could it could be like reassurance idea, like he assumes his father is alive, but it's just reassuring his thought that he's still alive. Could
Okay, yeah, so maybe it's like really trying to solidify the information. What's interesting is he says, "Is my father still alive?" What's weird about that? Yeah, why didn't he say, "Is our father still alive?" So there's some rabbinic thought on this as to why Joseph seems to have short-term memory loss. It doesn't. A lot of them are going to argue that's not what's going on here. One theory is that Joseph is actually asking, "Does my father still remember me at all? Is my father concerned about me at all?" Why might he ask that? Because exactly what Nate said. If he cared about me at all, where has he been these years? He knows that the brothers, at least he's overheard that the brothers know that he was sold. I can't really remember if he ever overhears that they told Jacob he was dead. So it does seem to be that Joseph is really concerned about this. Would my father even want to see me? Because why might he think that other than he hasn't come back to him? Who has replaced Joseph? Benjamin, yeah. And so Benjamin, he might be like, am I even on his radar? Because it seems like it's only Benjamin all the time, every day. So that's just kind of something that might be going on here with Joseph. He sends all of his brothers out of the room. This is most likely to kind of uphold this honor-shame culture. It would have been very, very shameful for Joseph to kind of air the family's dirty laundry in front of everybody. So that's kind of why he says, like, "Everybody get out." It's not that he was trying to, withhold this secret from the Egyptians, because he actually, in the next few verses, is going to tell Pharaoh what is happening. So verse 4, "So Joseph said to his brothers, 'Come near to me, please.' And when they came near and said, 'I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into slavery. Now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and they are yet 5 years in which they will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt.'" All right, so interesting kind of conversation that Joseph has here. First off, the brothers are pretty freaked out. It has just been revealed to them that the brother that they sold into slavery is now the second most, at the very least, powerful man in the world at this point. Even Joseph says that I have become like a father to Pharaoh. That's just kind of saying like how I've taken care of Pharaoh in these times. What's interesting here is that he wants his brothers to go back. He's even said this is kind of Joseph stepping out of this victimhood mentality. Why does he say he's in Egypt? To prepare a way. Because who sent me here? God. Okay, we're actually going to see, this is kind of the beginnings of the big revelation of Genesis in chapter 50, but this is kind of where Joseph is laying the seeds of his main argument in Genesis chapter 50, but he's saying, I am here so that I could save many lives. This is the beginning of the blessing in which God gave Abraham. God told Abraham that through this house, I will bless the nations of the world. That is the beginning of this promise. I was sent to Egypt so that I could save all of these lives. But he also says, but it's not over yet. We are only in year 2 of a 7-year famine. We've still got 5 years left to go. To put this in perspective, there's been a famine for 2 years. How many times have the brothers been back for food? Twice already. So you know that this is going to get bad. So the rest of the chapter is basically Joseph saying, I need you to go get Dad and come back here because you guys need to stay here if you want to live. So the brothers do that. They leave Joseph and they go ahead and go back to Dad. They tell Jacob, hey, by the way, Joseph is alive. Jacob has a hard time processing this until this really weird epiphany happens where he sees the wagons and then he knows that Joseph is alive and that they are going to be on their way to Egypt. There's a lot of different theories as to why this would be. Some are going to argue, and I want to get this right because I kind of messed it up in early bird, but when Jacob sees the wagons, there's this thing in the Midrash that says the Hebrew word for wagons is agalot, and it shares the exact same root letters as eglah, or a heifer or a calf. And I know you're on the edge of your seats to where this could be possibly going. In the Midrash, it says, according to rabbinic tradition, the last Torah topic Jacob and Joseph were studying together before Joseph was sold was the law of the Iglah Arufa, which is the broken neck heifer from Deuteronomy chapter 21. And this is a law that says when there is a slain body found between cities and the murderer is unknown, you have to leave a broken-necked heifer, which kind of sounds like wagon. is the thinking there. Now, there's a lot of questions there. What's the first question you have, Declan?
God hasn't given them.
Yeah, how could they be studying a Torah that has not been given yet? I had the same question, and it led me down a rabbit hole that I lost 2 hours of my life with. But here is some of the rabbinic tradition on that. They are going to say that the Torah has always been in the heart of the patriarchs. And so, apparently they were studying their heart Torah, and this is what they were coming across. You'll have to ask a Jewish person because I can't not make fun of it. So anyway, I'm sure it's very meaningful and impactful, but in either case, he sees the wagons and that's what kind of pulls him out of his stupor. One thought that actually Glenda had that I thought was like, ooh, that's way better. She posited that it might have reminded Jacob of his own offerings that he gave Esau. And that kind of nudged him out of his stupor because that he sent his offerings perhaps in wagons, and so maybe that was what kind of jutted him out. I don't know, but for whatever reason, you can tell that it's hard because the Midrash has to go way far afield to try to even make sense of it. So it's weird, but Jacob sees wagons and he's like, I know what to do, we need to go to Egypt. That's, so whatever. In any case, he finally figures out that they need to go, so they pack up and go. Why the wagons are there in the first place, I guess I should mention, is that Pharaoh actually sends a bunch of supplies and kind of a small army with the brothers to go pick up Jacob. So that just shows, we're going to see just how high Joseph is in Pharaoh's esteem here. He honors Joseph a lot throughout the remaining of these chapters, and it's also shown by how he treats Joseph's family.
That's how he knew the wagons had Egyptian tags.
Well, yes, yeah, that's how he knew it. Yeah, it's like, oh, surely that must be it. Yeah, so whatever. Yeah, yeah, it's the DMV from Egypt. That's how. Anyway, so the next thing we need to talk about is the. Ooh, wonder what happened there. Is the Great Migration. Chapter 46 is just the Great Migration, the transition from a family to an incubating nation. So Jacob starts to head to Egypt. We actually see that Jacob is going to start to take over his leadership role here a bit more. And they stop before they go to Egypt at a little place that should probably be familiar to us all. Beersheba. Yes, anyone remember what happens at Beersheba? What?
Everything.
Kind of everything. Yeah, Beersheba, lots of stuff happens. That's where Hagar is visited by God, all that stuff. So Beersheba, very, very important place. But for our purposes, it's very important because it is the last place in Canaan before you step out of it. And Jacob stops. Why might Jacob be nervous about going down to Egypt?
Go ahead, then.
No, you go.
I was gonna say, I wonder if he knows about the prophecy given to Abraham that your descendants will be in Egypt for 400 years.
Okay, yeah, so maybe he sniffs a little bit of the prophecy, perhaps. Yeah, okay, Declan?
I was gonna say, the last time his forefathers went to Egypt, it wasn't so great for them.
Yes, yeah, so maybe it's prophecy, or maybe it is every time we go down to Egypt, something bad happens. Whenever we look at the lives of the patriarchs, Abraham goes down to Egypt, and what's something that bad happens there?
They're gonna take my way.
He almost loses Sarah, and he picks up a straggler by the name of Hagar that really messes things up. Isaac actually never goes down to Egypt, but he is actually given specific instruction not to go to Egypt even when it is a famine. Isaac is told, do not go to Egypt if it is a famine. Jacob is on the cusp of going to Egypt, and what is it? A famine. So he is thinking, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. And so that's kind of informs why in the middle of this, God gives him a vision. Sometimes we just kind of gloss over that. It's like, oh, that's a nice little encouragement. It was actually to push Jacob over the line. Jacob is trying to be righteous here for, one of the first times. So he's trying to be the good guy here, and God actually sends him a vision that says, relax, it's okay, this is what I want. You need to go to Egypt. What is interesting about this vision and this conversation between him and God, when was the last time God spoke to him? Or interacted with him at all? Directly.
During the wrestling match.
Yeah, during the wrestling match. That's the last time that, at least the text says that Jacob and God have really wrestled together or had direct contact. There's some indication, it's like God renames him Israel a couple of chapters later, but we're not sure if that was like a real conversation or just like a proclamation. But in any case, this is the first time we've seen Jacob interact with God in a long, long time, in chapter-wise and in year-wise. Now, we don't know. The text is silent. He could have been interacting with God a lot during this time, but it doesn't seem to be the case because he's making a lot of mistakes that we would feel like if he was really had a close relationship with God, he might have been able to see these things coming. But in any case, God has a conversation with him, pushes him over the edge and says, yes, you should be going to Egypt. This is what I want. Then, continuing on in chapter 46, we get this, it's kind of a genealogy, but more like a census of who's all going with him. And then at the end of that chapter, or verse 26 at least, it says, all the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were in his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. Okay, why might 70 be significant?
10 times 7.
Okay, well, what is that?
Well, 7
Have to do
is
with
a
anything.
important number. 7 is completion, perfection.
Yeah. Carry it over the line, brother. Okay, so why might that be important for our purposes right here? What is that saying to us?
The nation of Israel is complete.
Bullseye! Yes! Okay! Yes! Bingo, Yahtzee, Jenga, whatever. Yes! So, what this number is telling us here is that for the first time in the story, at least since Genesis 37, the family is complete. Declan is exactly right. 7 is that number of perfection and completeness. Multiply that by 10, we get 70, and that is kind of what the text wants us to know here, is that this is where it should be. This is what should happen. Everybody is united, everybody is in the same place, and everybody is getting along. This is how it should be. Then, in the ending of that chapter, continuing on in verse 28, he had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. When's the last time someone wept on their neck a good while? Esau and Jacob. Okay, we're getting this parallel here that the family is reunited, that brother has forgiven brother, and that we are coming into a time of unification. Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh that I will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who are in Canaan have come to me, and the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now. Both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. Okay, is Joseph like on a great prank show and be like, this is what you should say because he's totally gonna hate you? What is Joseph's plan here? Okay, so at the very least, he's trying to get land. Okay, yeah, it's like he wants land, but he wants this specific land. Okay, what else is Joseph trying to accomplish here?
Keep them separate from the Egyptians.
What is our number one fear whenever we get out of the promised land and into a foreign nation? Assimilation. In fact, that's even a problem in the promised land. We saw that in Genesis 34 with Shechem. Assimilation is our greatest fear here. We do not want to look like the nations of the world. So Joseph's plan here is twofold, and I know that I've been hard on Joseph, but this particular plan shows his administrative brilliance and his great political maneuvering. This is actually a very good plan on his part. He says, I need to keep my family separate so they do not become Egyptian, because I know exactly how hard that is, and we're actually going to see some of that come into play in chapter 47. That's going to be a whoopsie doodles on Joseph's part. Ooh, all these J's are getting. But in any case, he says, go to Pharaoh and tell him that you are shepherds, because that's icky to the Egyptians. And Pharaoh is going to say, actually, I need you guys way over there so that nobody can bother you and you can't touch us because that's gross. And that's a great plan. Goshen is actually a very fertile place in Egypt. It's the place where all the herds go. So they actually are going to probably have a little bit of a monopoly on the shepherding business here. And this actually leads them into an incredible era of prosperity for the Israelites at this point in Goshen. Yeah, Dex.
So, with Cain and Abel, did you say that the
Cain and
people?
Abel.
Hold on. So you said that.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, connecting him with Jacob and Esau.
Yeah.
You said that Abel was a man of the tents, kind of like Jacob was, because shepherding.
Yeah, uh-huh.
So Egypt would be more the people of the fields, and they despise the people, the shepherds. They are abominations. So
Ooh,
like,
yeah,
the
that's a-
people of the fields are oppressing the people of the tents.
That's a really good analysis. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right on to something here. Yeah, I think that Egypt is definitely the people of the fields, the people of violence, power, empire, and we have the shepherds. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah. So yeah, we have like the micro conflict here and the macro conflict here. And Joseph maneuvers his family into this great land, separate from everyone else, and the ability to be prosperous, but also not assimilate into Egypt. This is probably Joseph's best move since the whole let's save 20% from the plentiful years. However, this kind of sets us up for a big whoopsie as we go. So in chapter 47, we have that the Joseph's brothers, in fact, do settle in the land of Goshen. Pharaoh is on board with that plan. Then we have this really, really weird interaction between Jacob and Pharaoh. Anyone remember what the really weird interaction is? Jacob talks to Pharaoh and then does something weird. You remember? Jacob blesses Pharaoh. Why is that weird?
Pharaoh considers himself to be a god.
Yeah, so who is in a position to bless someone?
Patriot.
It's always the greater party. Okay, the greater party, you have to be in a position of power over the other person to bless that person. So what is Jacob saying to Pharaoh that he blesses Pharaoh? I'm still better than you. Yeah, don't get a big head, Pharaoh, because you may have the power, you may have the empire, you may have the military, and you may have the food, but what do I have? I've got the covenant. And that's still going to play a much bigger part in this story than anything you have. So I am actually in a much better position to bless you than you are to bless me. Weirdest part of the story is Pharaoh is like, okay. Pharaoh doesn't seem to take offense or anything. In fact, it seems to accept it with a little bit of grace. What's interesting is that Pharaoh then asks how old Jacob is. Jacob says that he is 130. In verse 9, few and evil have been my days of the years of my life, and they have not attained the days and years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning. What is interesting here is that, first of all, Jacob is comparing his life to that of the other patriarchs and saying my life has been kind of a dumpster fire compared to the other patriarchs. And that's kind of true. Ever since the deception with Esau, it's kind of been one disaster after another for Jacob. He tricks himself into slavery for about 20 years. After he leaves that, he has to raise a family that is defined by dysfunction. He has this one shining moment with his brother of reconciliation, and then right after that, his favorite wife dies, and he has to bury her in Bethlehem. And then after that, his favorite son is supposedly murdered. So yeah, to Jacob, it probably seems like this has just been one disaster after another. But interesting how he characterizes his years as a sojourner. He is always constantly on the move. He is never a settler. He is always a sojourner. Even through the evil days, he still characterizes himself as a sojourner. He never lost that thread of the story. And what we are going to see happen for the rest of our time in Genesis is Jacob is going to be the one that constantly hammers in to his descendants, this is not the place we stay. This is not the place that we are supposed to end up. And with Jacob's dying axe, he will try to hammer that home for his kids. We do not end up in Egypt. With his language and with his actions, he wants that message to go through. Jacob has finally kind of internalized that part of the story. Egypt is not where we end up. Then we have this really unfortunate thing that Joseph does. Joseph is a master administrator, and he is incredibly powerful at this point. Anyone knows what he does next, Joseph? So we already talked about how the brothers have already been to Egypt twice to buy food. And Joseph says that we're not even halfway through this yet. You guys need to live here so that you don't die. So what does that mean for everybody else? We actually learned that the brothers' story is not unique, coming to Egypt a lot for food. In fact, it seems like everybody has to do that. Everybody has to come to Egypt for food. And at this point, a lot of people are coming back and saying, Joseph, we don't have any money. And so Joseph, being the kind, generous man he is, says, you know what, I'll give this food for you for free because I trust the story and I know God is going to have mercy on us all. Oh no, what does he do?
Says, give me all of your cattle.
He's like, okay, I'll trade you. All right, yeah, you can have food, but first I'm going to take all your stuff. Then everybody comes back and says, I don't have any stuff anymore. And this time Joseph says, oh well, since you don't have anything left, I'm a friend of the foreigner and the less fortunate, so now I will give you this for free.
How about I buy you instead?
Instead, I'm going to take everything you have. I'm going to take your land, and I'm going to take you. Like so much we've talked about with Joseph has some really great shining moments, but this moment is probably the greatest sin that Joseph commits. Is what seems like a good idea at the time, whether intentional or not, Joseph creates the system that will then enslave his ancestors for 400 years. Without Joseph's trusting of empire, there is no enslavement of Israel. But he does. This causes Egypt to be a complete totalitarian government that has complete control over its citizens. Because its citizens now do not have private property and are basically all slaves of the government. In fact, Joseph will go on to institute a mandatory 20% tax on everything that citizens do. They owe that 20% tax to the government. This will start the system, like I said, that enslaves Israel. This is Joseph's biggest moment where we see that while he did not completely lose his identity, Egypt did change him. Instead of looking out for those that need help, he is now seeing, what can I get out of this situation? He has let his Jacob kind of take over and enslaved an entire nation. Unfortunate. So, don't gloss over this part of Joseph's story. Once again, we need to ask ourselves, why Judah and not Joseph? And if I had to point to one action that says not Joseph, this would be it. Joseph does not trust the story enough to think that he can give away something for free. He has to get something. And while a lot of us are going to look at it as what is smart, shrewd business decision, it is actually that same decision that will cause all of this grief going forward in the book of Exodus. Chapter 48 is another really interesting chapter. I know we are flying through this, so if you have any questions or concerns or comments, please stop me. We have 3 chapters to go, so we still have a little bit of time. Chapter 48, we are told that Jacob is near death, and so he wants to do some special things for his descendants. We are also told that he is dim of sight because he is old. Who's the last patriarch that we had that was dim of sight? Isaac, that's right. And what episode followed this telling of us that he's dim of sight?
Esau.
Yeah, the blessing. Okay, so we've heard this story before. Here is where we need to remember that once again, Genesis was not written in a vacuum. Genesis is written in a certain culture in a certain time. And at this time, we are in the Sumerian culture. And we've talked a little bit about this before, where Sumerian view of history is one that is cyclical. And we still have remnants of this view today whenever we say history repeats itself. Yeah, we still think history is kind of a cycle. In fact, it's kind of a recent invention of humankind to say that time actually progresses. In terms of how long we've been on this earth, the large majority of our time has been thinking that history is more cyclical. It is just kind of a recent thing since probably the 1700s that we have thought that time is linear, that it progresses rather than in a circle. But the very first writings that we know of to ever challenge the thought that history is cyclical is right here in Genesis. But it's interesting because at first glance, it seems Genesis plays the cyclical theory out. History is cyclical. We've seen the same mistakes happen over and over and over again. We've seen these stories before over and over and over again. So if we were to take the cycle, and say to ourselves, here is another dim-eyed patriarch about to do the blessing, without even reading the chapter, what would you expect to happen?
Trickery.
Okay, some trickery maybe. What else? I'll give you a hint. 2 sons are coming forward. What would we expect?
The younger instead of the older.
Okay, always, ever since Cain and Abel, the younger is going to be blessed instead of the older. We have that in Cain and Abel. We have that in Noah's sons. We have that in Abraham's sons with Isaac and Ishmael. We have that in Isaac's sons with Jacob and Esau. Now we have Jacob, and now we have Joseph's sons coming forward for a blessing from a dim-eyed patriarch. We should expect the younger to be placed over the older. Then what should we expect? What happens anytime the younger is placed over the older? Division, anger, jealousy, violence. That's what we should expect. Anyone remember what happens in chapter 48? Joseph brings his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh is the oldest and Ephraim is the youngest. And he brings them into the room with Manasseh on Joseph's right side. Because, anyone remember the phrase, the right hand of the father? Okay, what does that mean? Heir.
Yeah.
Strong. What Jesus is referenced as. Right hand of the father, okay? So the oldest should obviously be blessed with the right hand, the youngest to the left hand. What does Jacob do?
Flip the script.
Okay? Does this Joseph is dismayed, which is ironic. Why is that ironic? Out of everyone to know that things don't go oldest to youngest, it probably should be him, but he is still dismayed that it looks like Ephraim is going to be placed over Manasseh. Jacob says, "Get out of here, I know exactly what I'm doing," and he blesses Ephraim as the heir and Manasseh as the lesser. Then what happens? You're right. Nothing. What should we expect to happen?
Manasseh start choking out Ephraim.
Manasseh tackles Ephraim, punches him, maybe sells him into slavery, I don't know, takes him to a field. Where's the cycle? Where's the story that I've come to know and hate? Doesn't happen. We see, for the first time in our story, the cycle is broken. The younger is placed above the older, and the older does nothing. And the youngest doesn't even say, "You know, I have a dream." He doesn't do that either. Both sons live in peace with it. Now, some other significant things that are going on here is, first off, who usually does the blessings? What's the relationship? Other than greater and lesser, all the blessings we've seen before, who are the two parties? Father, son. Okay, what is this?
Father,
Grandfather.
Okay, so what is the significance that it's not Joseph blessing them, but Jacob?
Joseph doesn't get any blessing of a promise there.
Yeah, so first of all, it bypasses Joseph a little bit, but he's blessed in other ways. What is the status of Ephraim and Manasseh now?
They're elevated to.
Sonship. They are heirs. What is interesting here is that Joseph becomes the Behor in a roundabout way. Because if he gets two sons that are elevated to sonship, what portion does he get of the estate? Double. He has become the Behor through basically a technicality, which was what Jacob wanted all along. So Jacob elevates Manasseh and Ephraim to sonship. Mathematically speaking, how does this throw a wrench into this? How many sons are there now?
13.
Okay, yeah, so that kind of blows my theory about numbers meaning something out of the water. So a lot of rabbis are going to do some different things with this. Some rabbis are going to say, no, there are still 12, and they're going to put an umbrella over Manasseh and Ephraim and just call them the house of Joseph, which makes 12. And to further solidify this, whenever the kingdom split, the south goes, Judah and Benjamin and Simeon go this way, and then everybody else goes to the north. They are sometimes just called the house of Joseph or just called the Ephraimites. Okay, so whenever you see the northern kingdom of Israel, sometimes they are just referred to as Ephraimites. Yeah.
At least my translation calls them the half-tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim, which would also kind of, I don't know if that's in Hebrew.
Yeah, it's not. That's also like the English translator's way of trying to reconcile it. Calling them half-tribes is actually kind of hilarious because Ephraim is actually bigger than all the other tribes. Ephraim becomes such a powerhouse that, like I said, northern Israel is sometimes just referred to as the Ephraimites because they become so powerful. So calling them half a tribe is probably a huge diss to them. They probably would not like it. But, so sometimes they do that. Sometimes they're going to say that Levi is not really a real tribe. Why might they say that?
It's a nation of priests.
Because they don't get land. Okay, so sometimes they're like, well, according to the land, there is 12 tribes because Levi is scattered because they are priests throughout the land. So there's different ways you can look at it. It still comes out to 12, but just so you know, if somebody tries to trip you up and say, well, there's actually 13, that's a problem in the Bible, you probably shouldn't believe it, that'd be really dumb. But you can say, it's like, well, did you know? And then bury them in your scholarly information. Anyway, so that's how we get 12, and that is kind of the story of the crossed hand blessing. The biggest moral of that story, though, is that the cycle is starting to break. That younger is put above older, and yet they don't kill each other. Great things are happening here. Then, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt again.
No,
but,
please do.
Would that be why Joseph was dismayed? Not because he didn't expect it, but because he expected the older to become angry at the younger
And
perpetuate. the cycle.
yeah, and that's very true. And his trauma could have been playing into his dismay. Yeah, that's
One
a,
other one of him.
yeah, that absolutely could be a part of it. I love that. The other important thing about that is who's mom of Ephraim and Manasseh?
An Egyptian.
An Egyptian priestess. So a part of this is kind of a rescue mission by Jacob saying, they are not Egyptian, they are mine. They are Hebrew. They will not be Egyptian, they will be mine. They are Israelites. So that's also significant in this chapter. Chapter 49 is a long chapter of the blessings of the tribes of Israel. The biggest ones that we're going to look at is Reuben. First of all, Reuben is blessed. He comes out okay, but not the greatest. He is blessed as being strong, but also unstable. And it is cited his dalliance with Bilhah, the concubine, who was Jacob's concubine. So that's kind of his reason for disinheritance. Then it goes on to bless Levi and Simeon together. But their blessing is probably not the greatest because they are told that they will be scattered because of their violent tendencies from our episode there at Shechem. And so Simeon will get the raw end of this deal. Simeon will actually be swallowed up into Judah later in the story. Judah will become so powerful and Simeon will be kind of landlocked that Judah will overcome Simeon. And Simeon really doesn't play a whole lot into the story. Levi is scattered, but he actually reframes and recaptures his zeal, but puts it in a different way as becoming priests. So Levi actually kind of comes out okay. He's still scattered, he has no land, but he is able to recapture his zeal and put it in a more productive way. That leaves Judah. Judah is given the scepter. He has probably the longest blessing. It talks about how strong he is. This is also where we get the language of Judah being a lion, the Lion of Judah. It says the scepter will never leave the house of Judah. This is where we get that promise that the kings of Israel are going to be from the tribe of Judah. And that keeps going. I had one more thing to say about that, but I forgot. So it continues to go through, and then we come to, there's a lot of other blessings for all the different tribes. If you want to read them, you sure can. We only have 5 minutes, so we're not going to. But it is really fun to read those blessings and see how they play out in the rest of the story. Jacob is absolutely 100% dead on each of the tribes. Each blessing kind of plays out the exact way that Jacob describes them. He then gets to Joseph, and while Judah is described as the scepter, Joseph is described as the provider. He is going to be the one that gives sustenance and management, while Judah is going to be given sovereignty and justice. Why I pick out these two is because, like I said, it's going to become kind of Joseph versus Judah for the rest of the story, especially whenever the tribes split. It is seen as Joseph is the northern half and his descendants, whereas Judah takes the southern. It does go to show you that Joseph's line is scattered, and they will be intermingled with the Assyrians and the Babylonians, so much so that they will his descendants will be called half-breeds, and in the New Testament will be called Samaritans. Okay, so if you're ever wondering where Samaritans come from, it's old Joe. Whereas Judah is going to be of the Jews. So fun to look at those blessings, see how they play out. Jacob then knows that his time is coming to an end. He is going to die. And then he has this very interesting vow that he wants Joseph to make. He grabs his thigh. When's the last time we had a grab the thigh covenant? Anyone remember?
Bless me.
What?
Bless me. Wrestling.
No, well, that's interesting. No, he
His.
gets his thigh out of socket. When's the last time we had a thigh covenant?
Is it when the servant went to give?
Abraham, whenever he makes the servant grab his thigh and give him a covenant that's saying you're going to go get a bride for my son from my family. Every time we see a under thigh covenant, it's always to keep the family on mission. All right, it's supposed to keep the family together. Jacob's under the thigh covenant is, I will not be buried here. One of the things that we see when Jacob dies is that Joseph almost certainly has so much weight and so much influence that Jacob could have had a ginormous funeral, probably a monument to his name. If Jacob was buried in Egypt, we would probably see a Jacob pyramid. That is how much weight Joseph had, that his father would get that kind of honor. However, when we think about what that would have done to the Israelite psyche, every time they walk past that monument to Jacob, what are they thinking? This is where we belong. Jacob's here. So, what does Jacob want? I want to be buried with my fathers, with Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and who else? Leah. Isn't that surprising? Who should be buried there if we were like doing human nature? Rachel. However, what we see and why this is important and why I point this out is because Leah is buried there because we don't know what kind of relationship had developed between them in their old age, but we do know that if Judah is going to carry the scepter, then mom has to be part of the covenant. Mom has to be just as much of a matriarch as Rachel. And the best way to do that is to be buried where everybody else is. So, Leah and Jacob are actually going to be the last ones buried in that specific tomb. They are the patriarchs. That's it. Leah and Jacob. Rachel is in a ditch somewhere in Bethlehem. Probably not in a ditch, but she's on the side of the road in Bethlehem. Okay. That's just the text. I'm not whatever. So that's something to keep in mind. Then in the next chapter, Joseph actually keeps his side of the bargain. It is quite the funeral. They all go to back to Canaan, bury them there, and then what is the reaction of the brothers whenever Pappy is dead?
Oh man, Joseph's gonna kill us.
Nah, here it comes. All right. Joseph was playing nice while Dad was alive, but now that he's gone, we're gonna die. This is where I would argue the culmination of Genesis comes and where we will leave it. Verse 19. But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Why this is kind of the culmination of everything we learn in Genesis is, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Does this absolve the brothers of their bad behavior? hey, I was going to end up in Egypt, you know, it's like you can't be held accountable. God needed me in Egypt and he used you. How do we square that hole? Is there free will in this equation?
I mean, God wanted Jonah to go to Nineveh. He had multiple ways of doing it, but he ended up there either way. So just because Joseph ended up in Egypt, that doesn't mean that was the only or best way he could have ended up there.
I agree 100%. One of my favorite rabbis to read right now is a guy by the name of Rabbi David Foreman, still alive, still a great writer. And he says that God is a 4D chess player. And no matter, you are free to make whatever decisions you want to make, but you cannot stop God's plan. God will always work through your actions, good or bad. And as we can see, this sheds light on every story that we have come with Genesis so far. Every story, God, whatever the character meant to do, God used it for good. Even whenever we have Eve taking of the apple. Without Eve taking of the apple, we have no cross. Even through that first bad decision, God uses it for good. This is the question that Genesis leaves with us tonight. You can't stop God's plan, but you sure can be a part of it. Every character in Genesis was faced with a decision. Do I trust God enough to be part of his story, or do I go another way? Do I choose the world story or God's story? How did this story start?
Choosing the world story.
Well, how did it start at the very beginning?
Perfect place.
It was good. The story starts good. And every character was faced with the question is, do you believe that? Do you believe the story is good? Do you trust that the story is good? We see characters sometimes trust it and sometimes not. But here's the big secret. What you meant for evil against me, God meant for good. Joseph steps out of victimhood and embraces his part in the story, good and bad. Any comments, questions, or concerns before we leave Genesis? One final note, Joseph has a weird burial in and of itself. He is embalmed, but he is not put in the ground. Why might that be? In fact, does anyone know what Joseph makes the Israelites promise him?
Bring my
Don't
bones
they
out of
carry
here.
him out when they go?
Yeah, why?
They won't be buried there either.
Because Joseph says, this is not where I end up. And what I love about that is it's actually the inverse of what Jacob was trying to avoid, which is now every time an Israelite passed by Joseph's tomb, they are reminded of what? This is not where we end up. Someday, Joseph wants to be taken out of Egypt. And it takes 400 years for that promise to be fulfilled. But Moses indeed does take Joseph out.
Good thing the Egyptians had embalming technology.
Yeah, even Jacob is embalmed. I thought that interesting. Jacob is embalmed. He's the only patriarch to have that process done to him. I know we're out of time, but I did do this with the early bird class, so I want to do it with you guys as well. There is a Jewish practice that we'll talk about later on Sunday morning, but it's called Si'am. And it is all about whenever you finish a big text and a big study, you usually have a party. We already had the party. We had barbecue and stuff, so we're going to have to do that later. But whenever you finish a text, you don't cross over the finish line in exhaustion, but in celebration. And the next thing that you do with your momentum is that you actually read the next verse in the book that you want to study. So I want to tell you that most people have asked for it, and so you're going to get it.
Numbers.
January
Numbers.
2027,
Numbers.
we will start
Numbers.
in Exodus, and we will get there.
We will get to numbers. Oh,
Yeah, if you want numbers, we're gonna get there.
Numbers.
So here's what I want to do. I want to read the first passage of Exodus, and then I'll let you go. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Ishkar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all the generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. And in January 2027, we're going to find out what went wrong. I'll close this out in prayer. Father, we love you, and we thank you so much for this time that we've had to dig into the book of Genesis. We are so thankful that you gave us these stories to look at, to learn from, and we are so glad that you gave us this big, giant story of yours and your kingdom. God, I ask that we are reminded that the story is good, that we can trust you that the story is good, that you designed us to live in a way that will give us the most satisfaction, the most fulfillment, and most importantly, the most praise for you. God, I ask that we remember your servants in Genesis whenever we are trying to decide whether we trust you enough to continue in the story. God, we love you, and we once again thank you for this time. And in Jesus' name, amen. All right, thanks, guys. See you next time. See you for the summer series. Don't forget.
Wait, what's happening?